Hey, everybody, we are back. Brent Adamson and Carl Schmidt here talking about our forthcoming book, The Frame-Making Sale, which is due out September 9 and available for pre-order now. And Carl, I thought this week we could talk about the 4 worst words you can hear in sales. I was doing a meeting a while ago, a number of years ago in California with a group of sales leaders, and there was a head of sales there who told us a story about a multi-million-dollar deal they were doing. They've been pursuing this deal for the better part of, I don't know, a year and a half. Thought they were about to close the deal. It was going to be one of the biggest deals of the year. It was going to make or break their quarter. And then the customer just disappeared on them. They black holed, as we all like to say, right? And so, of course, the sales team, thinking this thing was about to cross the finish line, starts getting really panicky with the end of the quarter coming up. And finally, at some point, the customer contacts them, and they were frankly a little chagrined. It turns out the customer hadn't been had been avoiding them, not because they had changed their minds, but because they were embarrassed. Conversation started like this. It turns out that, well, this deal that we thought we were ready to sign off on and buy from you has to go in front of the capital review board. And funny enough, we didn't know we had a capital review board, but it turns out this deal, because it is so large, it hits that threshold of expense that has to be reviewed by this board. The capital review board doesn't meet for another 2 months, and so that's the soonest we can. And it's like, there went the quarter, there went the deal. This story does have a happy ending, which is eventually they got the deal in the door. But in that story, Carl, are in fact the 4 worst words you can hear in sales. It turns out that. I often joke when any sales call starts with a conversation with the customer says, it turns out that, it's like a relationship conversation starts with, we need to talk. It's all downhill from there. But what's really interesting, when the customer says it turns out that, customers like equally, if not even more frustrated than you are. It's like, oh my God, it turns out that my own company, it's like, I gotta get this person on board. It turns out this step is we forgot this step, and they're just really, really frustrated. In that moment where the customer is frustrated, there's this really interesting sort of opportunity, because in that moment, while the customer would be surprised, oftentimes the seller isn't.
Absolutely. And you hear this story, and we've heard so many versions of these, and we share a few in the book that are all just like steeped in emotion and pain, often from the seller's perspective, but it reflects the pain that customer's feeling as well, right? Because they're the ones that are really surprised, right? They're the one who just didn't know this landmine was out there that was going to, in this case, delay the deal, but often, absolutely derail it altogether. If we're dealing with an environment where there is this risk that really can be harmful, then the question is, well, what can we do about it? And fortunately, this is where the asymmetry of information between the seller and the buyer is a real opportunity for sellers.
It's funny because oftentimes when the customer says, it turns out that the capital review board needs to look this over, the reaction from the seller isn't like, what, a capital review board? It's more oftentimes that the reaction is like, oh, let me guess, they don't meet for another 2 months, do they? Or let me guess, they're asking these questions, or, oh, legal got involved, let me guess. In other words, instinctively and sometimes very practically, sellers actually can, quote unquote, guess or anticipate these obstacles even better in before the customer does. And again, that's such an interesting opportunity. It's like, rather than just like waiting for the trap to be set and then the customer falling into it and saying, oh, let me guess. What if we were to help them proactively avoid that trap altogether? And in fact, this capital review board story that was told to me by this head of sales, he said, we now ask every single customer before we do it, as we're doing the deal early on, we ask them, do you have a capital review board? And that's how you turn these challenges, it turns out that problems, into real coaching opportunities. This is such an interesting opportunity to kind of guide your customer, almost like a coach or a Sherpa, through this fraught buying journey, and help them either mitigate these challenges or maybe even avoid them altogether.
The opportunity for sellers to really help customers avoid these landmines, applies equally to process steps if they're buying something for the first time, right? If it's a new solution for them or their company, but it's just as relevant whether you're trying to grow an account and just do the renewal for the 10th year in a row. This is what frame making is all about. This is where we take that complexity, where we as sellers have the opportunity to take that complexity, to take that risk, and make it all feel that little bit more manageable for our customers, so they have that decision confidence to actually go forward and do and close the deal, and do the more ambitious, the more aggressive, that no regret, that high quality deal.
As a buyer, you run into enough of these obstacles inside of your organization. This time was the capital review board. Next time it's the CISO. Next time it's the lawyer. At some point, you think like, this is why we can't have nice things. This is why we just like, I'm not even going to try to go on this journey, because every time I try to go on this journey, it just ends in pain, tears, and frustration. And so I think what we've seen over as deals and decisions have become more and more complex over the last 5, 10, 15 years, is that customers' willingness and confidence in their ability to navigate that complexity has eroded deal to deal, month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year. So we've kind of landed in this place where I think sometimes it's easier for customers to say, it's just not worth it. And so then we come and say, well, here's the ROI. It's like, no, I get the ROI in your solution, still not worth it, because the mental anguish of going on this journey is too hard. And this is what frame making is all about. Is what if we were the one seller that showed up specifically in a way to help customers not feel better about the value of our solution, but help them feel better about their ability to navigate this mess, to think like, this time, actually, I can do it. And so I think in many ways, Carl, that's it, right? This is the whole premise of frame making, is how do we engage customers in such a way that we're not boosting their confidence in us so much, but for primarily boosting their confidence in themselves, such that they trust themselves to go on this journey. Because I think that's how not only they win, but that's ultimately how you win, isn't it?
Exactly. At the core, I think both of us are really aligned to this philosophy of helping others. Frame making is this common theme of a mindset of sellers helping customers buy better.
The book is available to pre-order now, wherever you pre-order your books. It's available to buy and purchase. September 9 is our release date. We can't wait to get it into everyone's hands. If you're thinking like you'd like to get this material in front of your team, give us a call. We've also built out the workshops that go with this so that we can run a whole series of workshops on this material. But one way or another, we are just excited to get these ideas into everyone's hands and give us all just another tool for our toolbox, a new mindset to think about how do we become the one seller that customers actually do want to talk to. And we think frame making is it. Cheers, everybody.